Back here on Media Row in New Orleans with Mike Sando, NFL reporter for The Athletic. And I got to give you some credit because we're hearing a lot this week about the Broncos needing a joker. Sean Payton coming out saying,
yeah,
that's the must-have of the offseason. You had this nailed a few weeks ago.
I did. So either Sean Payton's a big reader of The Athletic and he gets all of his ideas for offense there. I don't think that's true. So the other thing is maybe I just, talk to some people in the league who have a good feel for Sean Payton, what he wants to do, what he needs, what he's going to be looking for, what sort of the next step is to, go from being, a team that had a good year and maybe surprise some people to the team that maybe can make a push.
Yeah, and it's, watching the team week after week, it's kind of good to hear this kind of crystallized and actually him saying it, because stepping away from the analytics of it, like, there's something missing. The offense was missing that dynamic element. And the interesting thing with this joker, and of course, it's kind of not really a hybrid, but it's a running back who can be a dynamic pass catcher, not just catch screens and swings.
Sure.
A tight end who can operate in space.
Yeah.
And that's certainly something that was lacking. The second straight year, the Broncos had one of the least productive tight end positions. And they tried, they were doing a running back, not a two-way split. They were doing a three-way split, trying to figure out, can we get something from Javonte Williams, Audric Estime, and Jaleel McLaughlin down the stretch.
So he wants a piece. He wants a fun piece that, look, the first year was one of discovery, and we all know what was going on at quarterback. Second year was like, okay, we got our quarterback. Now we're going to get our program kind of going, and now it's like I want to have some, I want some new options on this vehicle, right? We got a vehicle, but now we want some of the top end stuff in it.
He built this too, kind of starting with the line. Really, he kind of punted quarterback because rode Russell Wilson for a year, and you kind of had to with that contract.
Oh yeah.
But the first thing he did in a year where he didn't have a first-round pick, didn't even have a second-round pick, had to trade slightly up to pick Marvin Mims late in round 2. But that first offseason was Mike McGlinchey, Ben Powers as two of his big signings, and then Zach Allen. So it was inside out. And it's so, sitting here now, it's like there's been this very careful build and process to it, but he kind of had to be careful because in one year he lacked draft capital, and another year he lacked cap space.
Yes, absolutely. There's a process to it. He's done it before. And the other thing is, remember, he was out for a while.
Yeah.
So you get a time to kind of think through it. You're looking at teams. You're thinking, okay, if it's Denver, if it's wherever else he was going to maybe go, you start scheming on it. So I think he's had a lot of time to think about it. He didn't just leave the Saints and come right in. He's got a plan.
Part of your work that is, I think, that I really like, and why we often cite your work, is how plugged in you are with scouts and evaluators, and that's a big part of what you do over at The Athletic. And hearing some of the people and what they said when you wrote this thing, you talked about Sean. One quoted, "Sean will have a clear vision of what he needs, and he will not let anyone get in the way of that." And then another, if they have a tight end and runner that can separate and win against man coverage, they would be really tough to deal with. So, with that in mind, around the league, what's the sense of how close this Broncos team is to, you got the Kansas City Chiefs here. Like, you're going to have to figure out things against them. How close are the Broncos to actually sustaining a challenge to Kansas City?
I don't know if anybody can say they can do that with Mahomes in this group to really be on par. But Sean Payton, not coincidentally, said we liked our matchup in the next game if we beat, so he's thinking it. And maybe it was maybe you're a little ahead of your skis, but I think he wants to be that way. I think it's calculated on purpose. I think he wants to have that aggressive attitude. But how could you say you're not going to get a Mahomes? Bo Nix could be really good. You're probably not going to be that. But you can build a team that defends Mahomes well.
Yeah.
You could build a team that, maybe you could win that division, because the Chiefs are not going to win every one-score game forever. Okay, they're going to have some years where they go 12-5, or something like that. That opens the door, lets you get a chance there. But I still think it's a high bar just because of the quarterback. Now, Andy Reid's 67. Is he going to do this 3-4 more years? How long of a window are we talking about here?
Yeah.
It may be more time than you think just because of how good the Chiefs are. You have to get to that level.
And if they keep this up, the challenge they have, respectfully to the Patriots in their run with Brady and Belichick, but the closest they came to having like a sustained challenge in that division were the couple of years where Rex Ryan got the Jets to back-to-back AFC Championship games. Whereas you look around the AFC West, just start with the coaches. I mean, it might be the best, or at least the most accomplished collection of coaches in one division in the league's history.
And super competitive guys.
Yeah.
Andy Reid's competitiveness is probably underrated because he kind of seemed, I think everybody likes him. He's in the commercials and stuff.
Yeah.
But these other guys, I mean, Jim Harbaugh is a little off. I say that affectionately. He's just a little, you talk to him, you're like, he's just a little different guy. And Pete Carroll, you would think it's phony until you're around him. It's real. Like he is the excitement and all of that. It's really him. I mean, he brings a different edge to it. Super competitive. I was covering the NFC West when he and Jim Harbaugh were going against each other. So it's super competitive. I agree. It's a very competitive division. I'm kind of interested in Sean Payton over time with both sides of the ball, because I think what happened to him in New Orleans was their defense got gutted with the whole Greg Williams thing, and they were never the same, and they went through 4 or 5 years there where they were a historically bad defense, and they got it back a little bit at the end. They kind of built it back. They had that great draft in 2017, but by then Breeze was kind of going down. So I think that gets lost a little bit in the analysis of all the things that Sean Payton did there. They lost their defense.
They were 7-9 for 3 straight years
with a 5,000-yard passer, that type of thing. So it takes a real calamity for that to have happen, and that's not going to happen again. So maybe he'll have a chance over a longer period of time to be good on both sides of the ball, which you really need to support your quarterback. Even Drew Brees couldn't win, in those circumstances, really win big.
Well, of course, having the Defensive Player of the Year certainly helps with Pat Surtain, but they re-signed Jonathan Cooper on the edge. They have Nick Bonito, Pro Bowler, on the opposite edge, who he's in a contract year, but he had kind of his breakthrough season. And then Zach Allen had a great season there up front. So they have some pieces, and they do have some shopping. I often talk about the shopping list. One of the things on the shopping list for this year, or the checklist, I should say, is probably extending Zach Allen, extending Nick Bonito to try to keep that together, and maybe adding somebody inside linebacker. That was another position Sean Payton talked about as one they had to address.
You can get those guys.
Yeah.
You don't have to go out on the first day of free agency and spend all your money to get that. So those are good positions to have to fill. Inside linebacker.
Yeah. I want to talk about the Raiders for a moment elsewhere in the AFC West. Obviously, Pete Carroll, you mentioned his demeanor and the energy. But what about Chip Kelly coming in? What kind of impact can that have, particularly the history he has of maximizing what he has at quarterback like he did with Nick Foles in Philly?
Well, not only that, that's what Pete Carroll's done his whole career.
Yeah.
Look wherever Pete Carroll's been. Geno Smith shocked everybody. Russell Wilson shocked everybody, right? Yeah. He beat the Saints and Sean Payton with Matt Hasselbeck on a 7-9 team. Everywhere he's been, he's gotten play at a quarterback too, and he's talked about that. I think what's interesting about Pete Carroll is he did not sign up the band of all the guys he'd been with forever. Yeah. Gus Bradley was rumored to be the D coordinator. He's keeping Patrick Graham.
Yeah.
People talked about Darrell Bevell, who'd been with him in Seattle. Would have been a real natural fit for him. He's going with Chip Kelly. That's an out-of-the-box hire. Now, Chip was known for his tempo and going really fast, and I think he realizes they're not going to go to that extent. Kind of like Cliff Kingsbury in Washington evolved a little bit there, but he's also going to be doing it like Cliff Kingsbury in Washington. Chip's going to be doing this under a defensive head coach. Yeah. So Pete, if you remember the reason Russell Wilson became a Bronco was because Russell Wilson wanted to throw a bunch, and Pete Carroll wanted to have a balanced offense. So Chip Kelly is an intriguing hire because he's not a Pete Carroll disciple. He's 61 years old. He doesn't need this, right? Yeah. He could walk away if he doesn't like it. So at the same time, he's not going for a head coaching job. Yeah. So he doesn't have to lead the league in passing. He can play kind of in this. I'm intrigued by it. I think it's a good sign for the Raiders that Pete is going with guys that you wouldn't necessarily expect, because a lot of times when you get empowered and older as a coach, you just want your buddies. Yeah. It's easier. You don't have to teach them how to coach how you want.
And it's interesting you mentioned with Sean Payton kind of taking that year off and maybe assessing. You think maybe some of that happened with Pete Carroll in that year to kind of reassess what he wants to do if he gets that final act?
Absolutely, and he did that before. He reinvented himself after he was fired by New England.
Yeah.
And he really honed his entire philosophy then. So I don't think this last year would have been as much of that for him. I think he's set pretty much in who he is. I think he was disappointed and a little surprised to be let go by Seattle.
Yeah.
I think they wanted to make some staff changes and that sort of thing. You know how that goes. And Pete wasn't going to do it, but Pete's almost doing the things that I perceive Seattle wanted him to do with his staff.
Yeah.
But it's his idea now.
Yeah.
Right? No one's telling him to do it.
Yeah.
And I give him credit because I think it's an interesting staff.
What do you think they do at quarterback?
It's possible Russell Wilson could come there.
Yeah.
They ended on bad terms, but I think there's been a warming since then. Pete will surely, want to draft somebody or have other options. One thing I noticed when he came to Seattle, they tried everything. I mean, they signed Matt Flynn, they brought in Charlie Whitehurst, they had Tavares Jackson, they drafted Russell Wilson. Yeah. They were swinging. They had Matt Hasselbeck. So that we could see some of that, just trying a guy. But Pete is very confident, much like Sean Payton. He's very confident in his ability to build a program that a quarterback can succeed and win with. He thinks there's 5 guys that are truly special, right? And that's true.
Yeah.
And the rest of them, you've got to know how to play with them. That's what Sean Payton's doing with Bo Nix. No one thinks Bo Nix is Andrew Luck or the absolute #1 overall pick of all time. But if you play right with him, you can be productive and win. That's what a coach does. And I think Pete Carroll is underrated at that because he's a defensive coach.
Yeah.
But he's really good at it. All of his quarterbacks have succeeded and exceeded expectations.
It's funny you kind of mentioned the tiers because of quarterbacks, and there's only that handful at the top. Because to go to the Chargers elsewhere in the AFC West, is Justin Herbert in that top tier? Or is he kind of in the next level?
He's probably in the 1.5 to 2. I think.
Yeah.
I think. Pick a number. 25 or 28 teams would probably trade their guy for him.
Yeah.
But when you continually have chances to win some of these games and don't, people start to whisper, hey, is he missing something there, right? And so, he's obviously had some bad games in big spots. I think it's important to him at a certain point to show that he's not that.
Yeah.
I think most of the league would still love to have him.
Yeah.
But after a while, the results are what they are.
And finally, what do you expect Sunday?
Oh, man, I think my prediction was 24-20 Chiefs.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm glad I don't have to bet any money on it because I think I can see pathways for both teams to win. But I picked against the Chiefs twice this year, both games against Buffalo. I was right once, I was wrong the other time. I do a weekly show in Kansas City radio, so I have to pick every week. I couldn't bring myself to pick against them again this week because I felt so dumb last week. I thought this is going to be it. The Bills are better, and I kind of feel like the Eagles are better. But I'm like everybody else. I'm chicken to bet against Mahomes.
So you picked them to beat the Broncos in the throwaway game in Week 18, or were we not counting that?
That's still in the game. I think I picked it to be closer than it was.
I think I was talking with Aaron Schatz of FTN Fantasy, and he said from a DVOA perspective, it was like a top 5 all-time beatdown and discrepancy between the teams. It was
and I would hate it if I was Kansas City. That would bother me. But Sean Payton's one of those guys.
Yeah.
He's going to do that sort of a thing. He's going to enjoy more than some of the other coaches kind of pantsing you, kind of like the trick play, like when he got that fake punt against the Bills.
Yes.
I think he enjoyed that 25% more than most coaches do. I think he loves that stuff. And it's probably when you play him, it rubs you the wrong way. But it brings something to your program, like an edge a little bit. He's always had that.
Well, today as we record this, it's the 15-year anniversary of the surprise onside kick in Super Bowl 44. And his first act in his first Broncos game was a surprise onside kick start. Yeah,
I saw that. He loves this stuff so much. It was like he couldn't resist doing it. It didn't work, but whatever.
I don't think anyone was sadder about losing the onside kick without having to declare. I think Sean Payton.
I think he loves that stuff. It's in his competitive nature. There's something about him,
All right. Mike Sando, The Athletic, appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching this edition of Orange and Blue Today. We'll talk to you next time.